Hello, and welcome to GMAT Club MBA Spotlight Fair. We're featuring some of the top business schools around the world here to give you an understanding and an insight into what it's like to be at the top business school programs here. So I'm super delighted and excited to be moderating and hosting for HBS. So today here we've got Cyril and we've got Chad. Quick side note, I'm actually also a HBS admit, so I'll be actually going to HBS next year, currently at HKS. Just a quick side note, but so I can definitely attest to how amazing the school is. So before I hand over, and I'm going to make sure this is very, very, very quick. Number one, there's going to be a Zoom session being hosted after this YouTube session. So if you've got any questions afterwards that you feel we haven't answered in this session, please feel free to still post your questions and then we'll get to them in the Zoom session. Number two is that we're going to be handing out some prizes during the session. So for those of you who are interested, there's going to be a link posted in the chat to the side. So feel free to click the link, enter your details to have a chance of being entered and win a prize. And then lastly, for those of you who knew me from earlier this year, I'm shameless when it comes to this. Please, please, please like and subscribe this video because it allows us to understand if we're giving you the right content, if there's any issues with what we're doing, just so that we can tailor things moving forward and just help you and support you best as you kind of go through this application journey as it comes to business school. So I think that's everything from my side at the moment. So I'm going to stop my yabbering and I'm going to hand it over to Cyril and Chad. And once again, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much, Linda. Cyril, good to be with you. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chad. It's great to be with you again, too. And thank you, Linda, for the kind intro and congrats on getting in. That's awesome.
So, Cyril, maybe do you want to introduce yourself briefly and then I can do so?
Yeah, let's do it. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cyril. I'm a second year here at Harvard Business School, and I serve as the Chief Admissions Ambassador for us as students here. So I've done this quite a few times with Chad and excited to be here again today.
I see a couple of flags in the background there, Cyril. I feel like they say a little bit about you. Do you want to speak to those?
Yes, sir. So as you can see on one side is a proud Lone Star. So right before starting up here at HBS, I was doing consulting in Texas for the past couple of years. So I became a huge fan of the great state of Texas and hence the Texas flag and the American flag in the background. And also went to Stanford undergrad, so like having a little bit of the different pieces of my life here while I'm at HBS.
Nice, nice. Well, it's good to be with you and with everyone who's joining us. My name is Chad Losee. So I'm an alum of the school. I graduated from Harvard Business School in 2013. So crazy that it's coming up on 10 years. And I'm also the head of admissions and financial aid for the MBA program. So it's really fun to be with all of you today. And you know, both Cyril and I, for Cyril, it was a lot, you know, not as long ago, but we both really remember what it's like to be in your shoes, thinking about applying to business school and which schools you want to apply to and how to put your heart into the application. So we're excited to be with you today and hopefully share some things that will be helpful to you. So I just want to start right off the bat. I mean, Cyril, one of the things that we get a lot of questions about is just this sense of like Harvard is the name that sometimes can feel a little bit intimidating. And I think sometimes people feel a little bit of imposter syndrome here. And I have my own story I can share about that. But I guess I just wanted to start with a question that may be on some people's minds, like, what is imposter syndrome and how is that present or not at HBS?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely something I hear from a lot of my classmates, and I can definitely attest I felt very similarly about, even as I was considering about HBS, whether I felt like I had the right experiences. I still felt fairly young coming out of undergrad in 2016. And didn't know if my background was too similar coming as one of the many consultants applying to this school. And then even here too, I think it's been a little bit challenging sometimes thinking about, oh, am I the right person here? There's all these incredible people who have had these really interesting backgrounds and experiences throughout their lives. But I think the one thing that you see, even as soon as you start the application process, and as I was chatting with current students and with alums, and then same here, once getting to HBS, having the opportunity to get to know my classmates and everyone here, you really get a feel pretty quickly that there is a place for you here. Admissions does an incredible job really reading everyone's stories and getting to know you. And you can really feel it the moment that you walk into one of the HBS classrooms here. You get to contribute your experiences in a case and to really help your classmates learn in a meaningful way, both inside the classroom and outside. And you really, as the more that you do that and the more that you get to know people in the school, it really becomes much more comfortable. And I think the last thing I would say on that is we're really fortunate just, I think, having such a supportive environment here where you can feel comfortable bringing in these different experiences and feeling like you really do belong in a meaningful way. And Chad, you did mention yourself that you're an alum, and you kind of had the very similar feeling about the imposter syndrome. Is there anything from your story that you want to share really briefly?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in Utah in the Western United States. And so I think for me, Harvard always felt like very far away and very sort of distant, both geographically and like, could I ever go to a place like Harvard? And so I think I was just a little bit in awe of like the place and like, could I even put myself in a place of applying? There are a couple experiences that I had at HBS after, thankfully applying and getting in. I would say the school is like incredibly intentional about helping you create a space where you'll feel comfortable and you'll have the supports that you need. And for me, one of the key areas was my section. So in your first year at HBS, you take all of your classes with the same group of 90 people. So it takes what is a large and wonderful business community and makes it very small. And each section is intentionally created to sort of bring in the diversity of the overall class, like all the lived experiences, industry experience, et cetera. And so I found that to be like a place where I could build deep relationships, where I could feel comfortable, where I could share things that were really personal to me and kind of the journey that I was on. So there are many other experiences, but that was one like right out of the gate that helped me feel more comfortable in a place like Harvard.
Absolutely. And I can attest to that too. The section experience has been one of my favorite things about being here at HBS. They're really your family from the get-go. And not only are they such an important part of your classroom experience, but then even outside of the classroom, they become your friends, their families do, their pets even. It really is a very unique part of HBS. And on that, Chad, I think it leads us into a really important question that a lot of people ask, and that's around, there's always this kind of question around, is there a typical profile for an HBS student? Do you think that is the case? Or if you don't, what would you potentially say to applicants right now, considering that potentially?
It's a great question. And, Cyril, you mentioned that you had a background in consulting. Oftentimes when I'm talking to prospective students who are in consulting, they say, oh, I know there's so many other consultants applying. It's going to be really hard for me to be admitted. And then when I talk to someone who's not in consulting, they say, oh, I know you only admit consultants. And so we have this way of like counting ourselves out of a process like an admissions process. And so what I hope to communicate loud and clear is like, we're looking for people from every background. We have over 300 universities represented in our class this year, many different industries, many different geographies that people have worked in, a lot of different lived experiences, different majors, different aspirations for their life. And because of the case method and the way that we teach and the residential community, we're looking for that difference of perspective and experience on purpose. We feel like that's core to the educational mission of HBS. So I hope people will read this and hear this and know that they shouldn't count themselves out, but they should count themselves in and give it their best shot and help us get to know them as best as they can. Cyril, you might be frozen, but you're in it's a very good freeze spot for you.
Hi, yes, it looks like it is a very, very good, position to be
design it better. You're back.
Okay, perfect. Apologies for that.
You were frozen in like a very pensive, like really good spot.
Good. Well, at least I'm glad it froze while I was looking my best, hopefully. But luckily, I was able to hear the end of your comment and jog something similar in my mind. One other thing that we hear often is kind of a fear around having a couple of low semesters in undergrad, or kind of fears around a low GMAT or GRE score. Is there anything that you would say to applicants kind of in that vein as well?
Yeah, so we look at all parts of the application together, and there's no, sometimes people feel like we have like this algorithm in the basement or something that's running applications. There's real people reading your entire application when you submit it. And so we're going to take in context your grades and your work experience and your test scores and your essay and your letters of recommendation, and look at all of those things to try to understand what's your potential. What are you going to contribute to your class? What are you going to contribute to your communities and to the world as an alum of the program? So we're really trying to get to know you on a personal level. And so like if you feel so there's no like point system, or like we don't have any one element that's more important than another in the application process. We look at all of those things together. And if you feel like, hey, I had this bad semester, or, maybe I didn't get quite the experience that I was looking for in work. I mean, we are actually living, hopefully at the tail end of a pandemic here. That's caused all sorts of disruptions in the work world too, and opportunities that people have had. There's space in our application for you to just explain any of those things and just give us the context so that we can understand and look at that information fully and holistically.
Fantastic. No, that's really great to hear. And I can attest, I think really to that point, it's really those stories that we're looking for in the classroom, and bring the whole classroom experience that we've been talking about alive in a really meaningful way.
Hey, Cyril, one other thing that I get asked a lot, and since you're in the program right now, I think sometimes people have this sense that Harvard's attracting a certain type of person, and that person is very competitive. And what does it feel like in the classroom at Harvard Business School?
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I get that a lot too. I even honestly felt the same, that I was coming to a really competitive place, but the word that I would honestly use is collaborative, and even at a deeper level, very family-like at the same time, just because you're all kind of going through these very detailed cases, these real world business problems. And it doesn't, as you kind of learn, and as hopefully we'll also see in the business world, one person can't solve these issues alone. And it really requires people with these different perspectives coming in, dissecting the problem in different ways to really come to the answer by the time we're hopefully done with the case experience and the end of a given class experience. So you learn that people really learn how to build off of each other, or, even we'll have like very healthy debate where we're using that as an opportunity to just push our learning and our thinking in really meaningful ways. And it's been honestly one of the best, most fun experiences being in the classroom, even compared to other educational experiences I've had in the past.
I like what you said about it feeling sort of family-like. So I have children, I'm married, and I was already married and had children when I was a student. And I'm someone that it's just easier for me to build relationships in smaller groups versus larger groups. And so one of the things that we lived on campus, we had a great experience as a family. And one of the things that we did was we had one night a week where we invited someone different over. And we had this big world map by our dinner table. And people from all over the world are at HBS. It's like the United Nations sometimes. It's done like the most interesting work. And, we got to learn from them. My children got to learn from them. And it was like this really fun way to build relationships over, like whatever we were eating that night in our like small apartment on campus. So
for sure,
words that you used to describe it.
Yeah, and that actually, I think, speaks to something that surprised me the most, honestly, coming here. It was just how diverse the class experience was. I think that's one of the most incredible things I've seen, even compared to other past experiences. So I love the fact that you had the globe and really could like probably spin it and find a classmate that had either lived there, grew up there, worked there. And these are just like the most fun people too at the end of the day. So yeah, I think, if there is one thing that really makes this place special, and you see it in every corner through the section experience, but then even just like through clubs and other extracurriculars you might be involved with, it really makes us such a unique, fun part of the experience.
So HBS this year is celebrating, there's posters all over campus, 100 years of the case method. So the case method is a different way to learn. Instead of going through textbooks, you're reading through a real business problem that a real person had to go through. You read that case ahead of time. They always end in like this cliffhanger, right? Like, what would you do if you were running this company? And then you come to class and you debate it. And that's where the magic of like having people who have different perspectives really comes to life. And you all see things a little bit differently. You look at the same facts based on your own experience, might interpret that differently, or devise a different plan for what you would do or what decision you would make. Maybe like, I think some of the tangible like business knowledge is quite obvious, but Cyril, can you speak to a little bit more of like the soft skills that you might develop, or what the dynamic feels like in the case method classroom?
Yeah, it's a great question. It can be a little bit tricky. I even found like, honestly, the extremes were a little bit ambiguous when I first came in. So the soft skills for sure, how do you learn things like leadership? And even like we have this really interesting course called Business, Government, and the International Economy. And it's kind of like a mix of different skills in a sense. But the thing that you really find through learning those soft skills is that you're being placed in the shoes of an actual protagonist. So this is a CEO or some other leader of a company facing a very real problem that has happened. And so that almost in a sense, it's less learning the theory. You learn that they'll give you frameworks as you go through the conversation, but you really have to be pragmatic about kind of what would you do in that given heat of the moment. And then have that sort of challenge, because you are going to, as a business leader, encounter like pushback, and you have to get buy-in from your company, from society around you. So that's one thing. The other side of the extreme, the quantitative skills, I think is also something that you hear kind of how do you learn that through the case method as well. And I think one of the cool things is that you learn less about, how to remember a certain formula that you might forget. I feel like I've learned an accounting formula 5 times and I always end up forgetting them. But it teaches you how to think from a managerial perspective of, if you are a leader of a company, how would you ask your CFO potentially kind of how to approach a certain issue, and to think through things in a way that a leader typically would in that context as well. So on both sides of that spectrum, I think there's just a ton of richness that comes from having something like the case method as well.
It's for me, when I was in all of your shoes, sort of thinking about schools, everyone will make their own sort of decisions about what schools resonate the most. For me, this was one of the most distinctive things about HBS, that HBS cares deeply about great classroom learning, and they care deeply about the students that are in the classroom, so much so that they're going to ask you to do 80% of the talking in class, right? They care so much about what you say and what you think and what you can bring, that they're going to feature you in the learning, and they're going to guide you and help you through it. And that is, that can be a little intimidating, but at the same time, like very ennobling of everyone's experience in the room. And we got to the point in our section where we were like, oh, we need Diana to weigh in on this, or we need her to speak up, because we know that they've had that direct experience, and we want to hear from them. The other, I think, soft skill that was helpful for me is that I didn't necessarily appreciate as much as I do now is listening, right? Like, think of how much time in a business setting, like you're speaking versus listening. And one of the things you practice over and over in the case method classroom is listening really intently to like what Cyril is saying or what so-and-so is saying and why they're saying it. Like, what is the experience that they have that's causing them to think about it this way? And then knowing, like, when I jump in, how do I say something that's going to move the conversation forward, that's going to build on what others have said, that really reads the room in a good way and helps move the conversation forward.
It's one of those things where it's a little daunting at first. I was a little scared coming into my first case conversation, but you really do, like, it does keep you on your toes and really engage in a meaningful way. And I love doing that, especially for those new cases where you kind of need to figure out things in a certain way as well. Chad, I hate to do this, but it looks like we're running low on time. We could talk about this all day long. I know you enjoyed your experience a ton, and I certainly am right now. Linda, maybe if I can ask Chad one really quick last question. What is one piece of advice that you would leave applicants with as they're kind of getting to the finish line with their applications for round 2 right now?
Yeah, so when Cyril and I talked about with the team, what should we cover in this session, we decided to just like go direct at like, what are the myths that are out there and try to bust some of those. And we started with one that I think is like alive and prevalent for many schools, which is like this myth of like, I can't get in, or I can't apply, or I can't even put myself in that place. And my biggest piece of advice is to say like, yes, it's difficult to get into any top business school program, but you definitely won't get in if you don't apply. So believe in yourself. Don't count yourself out of the process before you've gone through it, and just help us get to know you and your story. Any advice you'd give, Cyril?
I would definitely echo that. I hear so many incredible stories speaking with people who are interested in coming to the school. And, you know, I think it undertones something that we've been emphasizing throughout this conversation. It's really, you know, the value of this school is really having all these rich, diverse perspectives. And there is a voice for so many people out there. And the best way, we would love to get to know you. You know, I think even the going through the application process enforces that HBS is deliberate about that, from the way you write your essay to the way that they conduct interviews, which we can go into in more detail. But it really is intentional about making sure that your story really comes out. And so we would love to hear it for sure.
So Linda, I know you're going to come in with some questions, but since you did your reveal and building off of what Cyril said, I mean, can you talk about the application process and the interview process? And did you feel heard and understood?
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, please. Sorry.
Most definitely. I think that, first of all, thank you both so much. I think the points that were touched upon were very, very important, especially for applicants at this stage. My experience, and this isn't just because I'm here now, but I truly thought it was, for me, the best application experience, going through the HBS application experience. The interview, I know, Chad, you interviewed me. It didn't feel like an interview at all. It felt like a conversation. I know at the beginning I was very nervous, which I remember just like my heart pounding for the first minute and thinking, Linda, calm down. But it just became so relaxed and conversational. And I think what I loved is that you asked very, very good questions that made me reflect and think and just kind of explore different, especially related back to my background. And that's one thing that I think I really loved about HBS. You have someone who's looked at your application and the questions are tailored to you and your background. I think with some of the other applications, it was more generic. And just knowing that someone had taken the time to kind of like review your application, you feel very, very heard, even from the very beginning, before you've even started the interview. The fact that someone would even take the time to do that, first of all. Cool. So are you guys happy to answer some more questions? I know you've already touched on a lot of great stuff, and there's probably going to be some overlapping content. So I guess I'll just, if there's more to add, feel free to. If not, we can just move on to the next question.
Okay.
So the first one goes more back to the logistical side of things, and it's about funding. So we've got through, let me get it on the screen. So HBS does need-based aid, which is different from merit-based aid. What is need-based aid and how does it work? And why does HBS choose this method?
All right, let me give like a quick overview. So need-based aid means that after you're admitted, so admissions is completely on merit. So we don't look at your ability to pay for the program at all. But after you're admitted, there's a process where you share more about your income from the past few years, your assets, and also information about your growing up years, your socioeconomic background. And we use that information to allocate a $45 million budget of financial aid among our students. Half of our students receive this need-based aid. It's a scholarship that you don't have to pay back. The reason that we do need-based aid is need-based aid has been shown to be the one that kind of opens the most doors to people from the widest backgrounds. And it's really core to our pedagogy and to the education at HBS. We want you to be surrounded by people from every walk of life, irrespective of their financial backgrounds, so that you can benefit from their perspectives and the kind of work that they're going to do. We don't want to have like some subset of the population that isn't going to give you a sense of how to lead in any kind of organization. And so there's a lot of aid and support that's available to students, and it's all, you know, we have this need-based philosophy to just try to meet everyone where they are and support them as much as we can.
So the next one was, if you could speak about the return on investment of going to HBS and doing an MBA.
Yeah, so I always like to help people think of this in a really long-term way, right? So there is like the job you're going to get afterward, the money that you're going to invest, the time that you're going to invest. And I think however you run that model, the numbers are going to look really good. And you can run the model and use the assumptions, whatever you'd like to. But what I always like to say is, like, think about this over the long run, not just your first job out of a place like HBS, but where are you going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I think HBS, because of what you learn, because you'll be more effective with soft skills and leadership skills, because of the relationships that you build, it's just going to put you on a different slope. And that might take 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to realize, but it's going to open so many doors for you. And I would also say, like, it's going to help you figure out which doors to go through too, right? I think part of that journey you have to figure out in the early part of your career is, like, which one is going to be this perfect marriage of, like, what I'm passionate about and what I'm good about. And HBS can help you with both of those things.
Yep. And I would definitely double down on that. You know, I think there's something really unique to having 2 years where, in the course of busy professional lives and everything going on in one's personal lives as well, where you can really have dedicated time to reflect on what you've done, what you're interested in potentially pivoting to or doubling down on, and the relationship piece for sure. I mean, these are definitely people that I intend to keep as friends and connections for the rest of my life, honestly. You know, if you're ever 10 years down the road in a different part of the world, like, you will have an HBS connection there. And there's no other opportunity, I feel like, that really reinforces that better than 2 years you're at HBS.
Thank you both. I think I can maybe skip the next question. Oh, but I've been told we've got 1 minute left as well. So the time has gone super fast. So I'll take this opportunity to say thank you so much for both joining us today and giving us an insight into HBS and the application process. But also the great questions and the answers that you gave in terms of what I know for a fact when I was going through the process, there were definitely things at the forefront of my mind, and I can only assume it would be at the forefront of many applicants this cycle. So with a few seconds left, is there any last words that you guys want to give to the audience of potential applicants for this year?
I think, again, just reinforcing, we can't wait to hear your stories. Excited to hopefully have most of you apply, and just really enjoy the process, I think, too. There is something, I think, very reflective about going through this whole process, and not only for HBS to get to know you, but for you also to kind of reflect on all the really cool things that you've done up until this point, too. So definitely enjoy the ride a little bit, and I think you'll learn so much through the process of what you've done as well.
Yeah, and I would just echo that and say thank you. Thank you for spending half an hour with us. We know you're busy and you have lots of things to consider, and we're honored that you'd consider HBS. So thanks for having us too, Linda.
Thanks for being here. So as I said earlier, if there was any questions that weren't answered, I know there's quite a few because we only got through 2, but please feel free to put them in the chat and then we'll answer them in the Zoom session. Once again, thank you for joining us, and thanks everyone for dialing in.
Thanks, everyone.